All right. So thank you everyone for joining. As you mentioned, Riley Webb here. This is the Okta Advanced Server Access presentation. A lot of the excerpts are from the Okta ASA 101 presentation that they originally gave us at the beginning of this year when we started to implement it, and then we just modified it for our need. And we've actually given this to some even Okta's people for that. So let's go ahead and get started. Our agenda today will be a brief overview / background. We will also touch on some Okta fundamentals just for a minute or two, and then we'll go into ASA, rounding out the presentation with the demo to reinforce the concepts in the deck. Last but not least, we will have a Q&A, and total thing is maybe about 25 minutes, so it's not very long, so hopefully you'll have a lot of time left in your day after we're done here. Any questions before we get started? All right, let's rock and roll. So 30 seconds about me. CL did a lot of this already. Of course, I'm Riley. I'm an advisory specialist master working for Deloitte. My title is Deloitte Speak for Technical Manager. Before that, I worked at Lionsgate and Starz, the movie studio and cable channel provider. I have been in IT for about 24 years, and I've been working with Okta platform and environments and so on for about 5 years. More recently, I'm a member of Okta's Customer Advisory Board for Infrastructure Access, representing Deloitte Managed Services. We also do internal cloud service providers as well, for operations for commercial and government cloud clients and customers. And that is the extent of the marketing slide. I will say one disclaimer here, everything I'm talking about is Okta-centric. There are other players in this space. I personally prefer Okta for most solutions, but I acknowledge it is not the only solution. So don't think I'm up here as a fanboy saying that everything else sucks. There's a lot of stuff in the market, and make sure it's right for your intended purpose. So before we get into the Okta and ASA, let's talk about PAM versus Okta. And the reason I'm doing that is because when we do this presentation, sometimes folks confuse privileged access management, aka PAM, and identity access management, specifically Okta. So I built this chart to kind of list out the features and kind of lay it out what does, where it goes. I'm just going to go through the list real quick. As you may have noticed, there is a lot of overlap. To briefly go over the list, we have multi-factor authentication is pretty standard across most, if not all, vendors. Password vault and password management, the act of either storing your password for checkout when you need it, or password management being password rotations. Those are active features of password PAMs, excuse me. They're not supported by Okta at this time. Here they're talking about doing it, but they generally require you to log into a system and check out your ID. And Okta doesn't support that because Riley logs in as Riley and logs into the servers as Riley, and from end to end, you're able to track that entire connection and run attestation reports from that. And there's no need to check out a password. So moving on. Session recording, it's not always used in a lot of PAM setups I've seen out in the wild, but in general, but it is generally offered by those vendors that support PAM. Okta has session recording for Linux hosts right now out in early access. Windows session recording will be available in Q1 2021. Beyond that, there's detailed access control, which all of them offer, and it allows for granular access. And then, of course, you have event logging and Active Directory, which are pretty standard across all vendors, Okta and PAMs. And finally, I put in SAML, which is not a feature of PAM, but is a feature of Okta. And I figured it was only fair, since I'm saying all the things that PAM could do, we speak on what Okta does. So is there any questions about this kind of feature layout before we continue? All right. Okay, before we get into Okta ASA, let's talk about why we want to use Okta Identity Platform. To level set, Okta is the identity management solution, and at its core, it offers SSO, MFA, as we stated earlier, and also the Universal Directory. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but that can either integrate with Active Directory or replace Active Directory. So whether you use Active Directory and you import the users in, or you use the universal directory and just have them native inside of Okta, you're still able to use the users and their attributes to do things and do some trickery and magic in the background. The reason Okta is so compelling as a solution in my mind is the OIN, or Okta Integration Network. And what that is over 7,000 built-in applications and connectors to speed up the connection into thousands of applications. So kind of give some context around that. Before I was working on Okta, I was the ADFS admin, or Active Directory Federation Services, which does SAML SSO integrations. Using ADFS and working with the other side, we were trying to connect to another application, working with the other side, it could take anywhere from 4 hours to 4 days to set up one application. Using those built-in connectors in Okta, it could take anywhere from 5 minutes to 1 hour. So if you have 100 apps, you're talking about up to 400 days for ADFS versus only 2.5 weeks of work for Okta. So just by that, it's pretty compelling to choose Okta. So let's go over this architecture real quick. I'm not sure if everybody's seen it, so just to level set. Here's the SaaS Okta Cloud platform. In this scenario, we have Active Directory connected to it. The use case is an administrator or user, client, customer, whatever you have, will log into Okta using a username and password. It's pretty standard. And if they're Active Directory, it sees the domain name, it will pass the password as a hash to your Active Directory source, and Active Directory actually authenticates you. And if you pass that hash, then you get sent to MFA, and if you get past MFA, then you get single sign-on, and ultimately on to your SAM or OAuth applications. The beauty of this layout is a help desk can drop a user in a group. Okta will see that and automatically add you to that application that group is associated with. Conversely, if somebody leaves the company, help desk can disable somebody, it will disable them immediately. Any questions about the basic architecture of Okta before we go on to some more advanced topics? Coolio, moving on. So this slide shows the two leading research firms currently, Gartner and Forrester. You can see Okta is in the top right, which means both firms consider Okta to be the leader in their space. Second and beyond is up for debate depending on the firm. It's pretty much a little marketing slide, but Okta loves to let everybody know this. They're definitely a fan of me having that in my presentation. Any questions about that? You guys are awesome. All right, so before we dive into the pool that is ASA, we should talk about why we want to use the product. And that goes back to what's going on now. Currently, the way most companies use identities is not considered modern by most standards. And that comes up to there is not really any control over identities or credentials once you hand them out. Once an admin or a user, like me for instance, has their username and password, they could write it down, leave it on a sticky perhaps on their keyboard, or potentially even give it to somebody intentionally in the next office. It's against most companies' policies, but I bet everyone here could probably tell us a story of seeing somebody sharing credentials or circumventing policies like that. It's pretty standard fare, unfortunately.
Yeah, most technicians are handed their password just so that they wouldn't have to keep asking.
Exactly.
So
yeah, so
everybody gives me their password all the time.
Yeah, I could tell you some stories about that too. Yeah.
And handing us their phone saying, "Here, you can use this for the MFA."
Yeah, I don't think they understand they're giving up the keys of the kingdom when they do that, do they?
No. You might as well give me your credit card.
Fair enough. Cool. So another big problem we have is the poor user experience, and this goes probably back to Pam. Making an admin check out their ID for a few hours in an emergency is, I would consider, cumbersome and problematic. If that system is down too, you'll have to have some kind of break glass solution. So it's just, you can see some issues with the current way we're doing things with users and access. So now that we know some of the challenges, in comes Okta, who purchased Scale FT over 2 years ago. Scale FT offers ephemeral keys that are temporary, and I know you guys are all you all are IT folks. I don't know if you know what ephemeral keys are, but I'm just going to go over it just real quick. Ephemeral keys are just temporary keys. We like to use the hotel theory when we're explaining it to new people, right? When you get to a new hotel, you go to the front desk and you have to show ID, and then you get a key, and that key is issued for a duration of your stay, right? There's just not a bunch of keys against the wall and you just grab one and go to your room. Not normally, at least. There are no, blanked out, let's see. On the last day, pretty much on your last day of your stay, your key expires. There's no intervention from the person staying there. They can leave, the key is done, or they can go ask for a new key if the key is expired and they need more time. So that's the concept around an ephemeral key, right? You get it, you get to use it for a certain amount of time. If it expires for whatever reason, you can go get it renewed, but that one is dead and will never be used again. Any questions about that?
Yeah, this is Curtis. I did have some questions about longevity of some of these keys. In the industry we work in, we have certain users who they like to log in once and then never have to think about it ever again. That's kind of the way they have been used to working in an environment where they left things logged in all day long. What's some of your thoughts on how Okta can deal with that, whether we're talking about tokens that can automatically be refreshed while in use, or have a token that provides the ability to automatically refresh your authentication token over a specific period of time, but it doesn't give you access to anything other than a refresh? Some of those kinds of scenarios have come up in the past. I'm interested in your view.
So let me kind of break that down. The first part is the session timing, right? There are several places that you can control a user's experience, whether it be an admin or a user and their timeout sessions. For instance, you can make a end user that doesn't have many permissions, but they need to get on and maybe look at a log or something for their whatever they're doing. I don't know. You can make them have a 2-hour window before it times out. The session, we're not talking about keys yet, tokens, we're talking about the session. And you can also make an admin say every 15 minutes they have to do an MFA, right? So that's the beauty of Okta. You can control with policies what the different user experience, and it's all keyed off of groups. So I could say the admin groups, I want them to be super locked down because of their permission set, where they have MFA every 15 minutes, and also where users can be a little less stringent and maybe give them 30 minutes, an hour, whatever the case may be. So you have some granularity there. So now when you talk about the ephemeral keys, the ephemeral key system inside of Okta and ASA is all behind the scenes. The user does not see it. And it's the whole environment has keys. So your client machine as an admin has a certificate on it that connects to Okta. And then the servers have a key that connects to Okta. And Okta has the certificate authority that constantly rotates those keys every 5 minutes. So you go back to your example, if Riley is playing around, logs in, gets a key, but he decides to start playing, Candy Crush or something, every 5 minutes that certificate changes, right? So it doesn't stay the same every 5 minutes. If Riley is using the key, it only works for one command. So Riley types a command on the server. That's that certificate. The certificate is thrown away as soon as the command completes. And then, is he okay? Is he okay? Hello?
Yeah.
Sorry, some back talk. Anyway, so the keys rotate automatically every 5 minutes, but if you use it, it times out faster. So if you use it within 30 seconds of it being generated, it's trashed and a new one is generated for your next command. Does that answer your question? It's constantly updating certificates. And it's all behind the scenes. There's no user intervention.
Yes, thank you.
Some people think that's a bonus to have the certificates going between the client and the SaaS solution and the server and the SaaS solution, completing the loop. Some people find it a little cumbersome to have to get a certificate on their workstation. So I'd be interested to know your thoughts on that after we're done. So if that answers that, and anybody has anything else, we can continue. Okay. That brings us to the zero trust part, which is literally means trust no one. It's not rocket science. Zero trust is a strategy, a way of doing things where if you don't assume anything has access, you always constantly are checking its access. A lot of people use that term different ways. So that is the meaning behind Okta's use of zero trust, meaning it trusts nothing, i.e. the certs constantly changing. So keep that in mind when you're talking about Okta and Okta services. So Okta and ASA are cornerstones of a zero trust model, but not all encompassing. Again, zero trust is more of a strategy than just one solution to rule them all. You would have to do several things to get to that end point. This could definitely be a starting point for you. The reason ScaleFT was branded ASA, and I really only bring that up because in the demo, you're going to see a bunch of commands that say SFT, not ASA. So that's why I even bring up that Octobot ScaleFT. It actually, they never changed the binaries that you actually run in the background. And I'm not sure if that's because it was a limitation or they just didn't get around to it. But anyways, ASA features include a single interface to connect to any cloud vendor's offerings, virtual machines. User management is centralized. That means you assign users access in Okta, and Okta pushes that to ASA and ultimately to the servers. So you set it at the higher level and it goes down. You don't have to manage servers at a one-off anymore because you could be dealing with thousands of servers. It'd be problematic to go to each one individually. Another awesome feature of ASA right now is for DevOps ninjas, it's easy to install inline during builds, which we just finished a project with an internal team that does everything in line with Terraform. Pretty cool. I should also note that there are currently some limitations, but Okta's working on that when we're talking about the DevOps API connectivity. And I don't think I mentioned cloud vendors offering virtual machines, but this also could work on-prem with physical machines. I know that's kind of a aging out kind of concept, but some people still like the tactile feel of working on physical machines. So that is an option for you. Any questions before we move?
No, I think you're doing a great job.
Yeah, thank you. Am I going too fast? I'm kind of like blowing through this stuff. I want to make sure we get through all this. So let me know if you want me to slow it down. All right. All right, so why ASA, you're probably asking by now. Simply put, it's an extension of Okta, much to Curtis's point that you need some controls around the user experience and timeouts and stuff like that. The integrations of AD and stuff, that is all going to be at the Okta level, and ASA is a module of Okta. So the use case would kind of be, or the pattern would be, so users are added to Okta via the universal directory. Once they're in the universal directory, we can enable MFA for that user experience. And finally, we can SSO that user to their team's virtual machines or SAML connected SSO apps. Yeah, and of course, I've already said it already supports physical machines too. I think it's pretty cool, and I kind of hope you guys do too, but we'll see once you guys, after you see the demo. I'm interested to hear everybody's input. All right. So local management, that's a big one. Local management is done in Okta ASA, not on the individual systems or in the domain, which I mentioned already. You can assign users user level access or admin or root access or anywhere in between.
Sudo.
It's always sudo, baby. That's what I'm talking about, the sudoers. With fine-grained access controls, you might want to allow level 1 support. You make them a user, but give them the ability to run specific commands and only those commands. That way you don't have to give them full root access or give them more privileges than they need. And that goes back to zero trust and, you know, where it's least privileges rules apply. Very handy. Probably a good time to note that the Windows access is only 2 levels right now. You can be a user or you can be an admin. There's no power user or any of those backup user or server admins like there are inside of Windows right now. I hear talk that is on the roadmap for 2021. So we'll be looking out for that to give a little more granularity on the Windows side. But honestly, so far in our use cases, user level access or Windows admin has pretty much fit the bill for everything we've had to do.
I mean, does your PAM, when you're using the PAM to get the admin rights to do that, what keeps them from constantly keep going in there and getting the PAM admin password?
Well, you don't. Yeah, you will. So the use case. So what you can do, if I understand what you're saying, you have a user that goes in and needs to be on the system, but does not need to be an administrator. So you make them a user. What we have done is we have ServiceNow, our ticketing system connected to Okta, which is connected to ASA, and a user can request access in ServiceNow. It can go through a workflow approval to their manager, and we can assign how much time they have to be an administrator. So you have a workflow to control somebody just going back to the well over and over again. And then Okta does not have a PAM. So when I log into Okta, I log in as Riley.
Mm-hmm.
When I go to the servers, I still log in as Riley. So the beauty of that is whenever you're doing attestation reports, whenever you're being audited, you can actually say that Riley was logged in from this time doing this thing, and I can tell you from end to end what he was doing. Whereas with PAM, you would have to go, well, I know Riley was checked out a PAM or an ID at this time, so now I got to go to the server and see what that ID was used, how long that ID was used, what was done. The attestation is definitely doable, but it definitely takes some legwork. So this is one of the advantages of Okta ASA is it allows you to see the user from end to end as one whole ID, if you will. And I think I'll show that in I will show that in the demo, what that looks like. So let's see. With fine grained access control, I already said that one. We'd already done that. Let's see. Entitlements. So allowing specific commands is done through the entitlement interface. So this goes back to the sudoers that somebody was talking about. You have a user level in Linux and you have a root level. And if either one of those is not good enough for your use case, you can actually go into the entitlement system and say, I want Riley to be able to I want him to be able to SU to this application user ID, but I do not want him to be able to switch over to root, or I do not want him to be able to run this command, right? I just want him to be able to do this one specific thing every day, hit the button like the good monkey he is, and then get out of the system. All right. So yeah, and with the entitlement interface, you can allow a single command or a group of commands, by allowing a whole directory of access, meaning I can do the user bin directory or just one command like yum or touch and no other commands, depending on what you wanted to do. And that is all controllable in the ASA interface. And we'll be running through that in the demo shortly here. Any questions about the basics of access?
Nah, that sounds awesome.
Right on.
I enjoyed that.
So here we're talking about the ASA API, and what that allows you to do is use ASA programmatically. These are some of the common things that we are doing with it. The client approvals, pre-authorizations, external tickets with ServiceNow. We also, as I'm alluded to several times, I think already, is you can also do attestation support with this, right? You can run reports that give you end-to-end access to your user's experience and see what Riley was doing on the system. And there are pre-canned reports built in, and then there are custom reports as well that can be run. And there's other stuff too. You can actually deploy the ASA tenants, add systems, groups, whatever you want to do. Basically, anything you can do in the screen is accessible through an API. Almost. I'm doing air quotes that you can't see. There are a couple of limitations that Okta is addressing, and I think they'll have those ready in this upcoming Q1, Q2, hopefully, ready to test. So moving on. Audit logs, not very sexy, but they are pretty standard. You're able to see who connected, when they connected, and where from. You can see access granted or denied, and just some of the log features that are supported. And again, PAMs, to Randy's point, is PAMs do session recording out of the box. Been pretty much standard right now. Okta has added Linux session logging as of Q3, Q4 of this year. It's in early release, and they'll be doing Windows session logging in Q1 of 2021. So that's right around the corner, and we definitely need that. So we can not only just see the logs, but we'll also be able to see the session and what the person did and what commands they typed and the output too. We're just worried about some concerns about seeing some private stuff as far as customer data, but we'll work on that when we get to it. Any questions about the API or logs? Right on. So this is the 50,000 foot view of the ASA and the Okta platform. You may notice that the graphic is very similar to what we had in the first couple of slides, but if you could draw your attention to the client box to the left. So as I mentioned before, you have 3 areas, if you will. You have the client install, the platform, and the server install. And the client is on the left, if you focus on that for a moment. There's a small agent that runs there's a small agent that runs on the client that does the following. It's lightweight, super small, few K. It's not gonna take, eat up your system processes and stuff. And it runs on all popular OSs. Right now, I've seen support for Windows, Linux flavors, SUSE, of course, and even Mac. So client connections should not be an issue unless you're using something that's really niche. The client's job pretty much is to handle the connections to the server. It also handles certificates on the local machine. As I mentioned, there's a client certificate store here, and that kind of brings us to the platform. The platform is the Okta SaaS solution, and what that does is it handles the control plane and the admin dashboard that we'll see shortly. In addition to that, the Okta SaaS handles the certificate authority, and that's what hands out the ephemeral certificates or temp keys, and it's constantly passing them between the client and the platform and the server, and just doing that, their individual certificates. And finally, to the right, the server box. Again, it's the same lightweight agent that's used for accepting the certs, but it also handles local users and groups that are pushed, synced down to the server. And the agent is also responsible for log events, all the logging. And so just to describe this layout, once again, this is super basic. I mean, it can do a lot more stuff than this, but it's just to kind of relay what we're trying to get at right now. And you'll notice that the design is similar. You have AD, so a user logs in, they're hashed out to AD. If it's approved, and they get MFA and single sign-on, but this time they can go to a SSH session or an RDP session. And there should actually be another box here that probably says SAML and SSO. So technically you can go to all those places just out of one SSO login, session login. It's pretty cool. Any questions about that? All right. And don't worry if it's not jiving right now. I think once we do the demo, it'll make a lot more sense. So everybody, fingers crossed that the demo works. I hate live demos. Let's see. So here we have like a tighter view of what's going on during the session. So the client will request a session from Okta. Okta will do its approval method, whether that be just a username, password, or MFA, or whatever the case may be, making sure that you're on the right network. It also does whitelisting networks too, I didn't mention. Once you're verified and proven legit, it will issue a credential, and you will use that credential to log into your server or run your server command. And it does that over and over again for every command. It's not, again, once you use the cert, it throws it away. It does not use the same cert over and over again. And then all of that is audited intentionally through the whole process. So a couple of things there. Certs are scoped to a single command, which I've already alluded to. Once the command completes, a new cert is issued, the other one's trashed. A lot of people have asked me in the past, they wondered what stops somebody from grabbing a cert and moving it? And I guess the short answer is certs are tied to the user and the device. So even if you could find it and move it and crack it, you still have only 5 minutes to use the cert before it's gone. And then it's gone for good. This is the nature of ephemeral certificates. I should also mention that ASA enrolled machines use certs, as we stated, and not passwords. The beauty of that is, so if you have internet-facing systems, everybody tries to do password sprays and brute force attacks. Username and passwords just won't work anymore. It just ignores them. So good luck with that. It's just a waste of their time, and then that means they're not hacking somebody else. So that might be an advantage. Any questions about anything on this screen? Cool. Well, that kind of brings us up to the live demo. We talked about all those ASA topics. I guess I'm going to show some of them to you. We have a basic ASA demo prepared, and it's going to basically consist of us logging into the systems as an admin. I'll show you how that looks, and then I will show you what it looks like to demote that user, and then show what it looks like to log in as a user, and maybe a real-time modification too. We'll see how that goes. I have a disclaimer here from microservices. So I don't know if everybody's familiar, but Okta is a proud client of AWS microservices.
Yay.
Meaning that whenever I do something inside of the ASA console and it says successful, what it's really saying is it successfully wrote it to the queue. And microservices, if you're not familiar, is a series of queues potentially. You write something to a queue, and then a worker comes back behind you and grabs that queue job and then goes and does something. So what does that mean? If I go and change somebody's permission in ASA, it writes it to a queue. A job will come behind me and grab that job and go facilitate it. And it could take up to 7 minutes for that to propagate. If you have 10, it could be one server, it could be 10,000 servers, but you don't know how long it's going to take. So I always plan for 7 minutes for every command. That command to change something, right? Not typing a command to do work, but if I want to make Riley a user or an administrator, elevate or lower him, it takes up to 7 minutes. And that's because you just don't know how busy the microservice is, right? It could be doing things for a bunch of different services, companies at once, or it could be focused on you. I've seen it go as fast as 30 seconds. I've been told by Okta support that 7 minutes is the absolute longest that you would have to wait. So what does that mean? Again, if you're trying to raise somebody from user to admin, that'll take about 7 minutes. If you're trying to add somebody, give somebody extra command so they can run a command that they didn't have access to previously, you can expect 7 minutes. But if Riley leaves the company and you disable him in AD, that changes instant. Anytime you remove somebody's access, that is instant. So lowering or elevating takes a couple of minutes. Removing completely a user, instant. I guess they have a express queue for that. I'm not really asked what the deal was with that kind of workout.
Yeah, because a lot of damage can be done in 7 minutes.
Well, 7 minutes, again, is just for elevating somebody's permission, right? They're still in the fold, right? Riley leaves the company, you disable his account, that's relatively instantaneous.
Yeah.
So you
Well,
can't go.
What I'm saying is if it's not,
Oh, gotcha,
that's
yeah.
why they did it, because 7 minutes could be disastrous.
Correct. So I'm going to back out of my prez right now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to first log into the ASA system, or ultimately Okta is what I'm logging into, right? So I do SFT login. There's that SFT command I told you. Oh, didn't see that one coming.
The power of live.
Let's see what's going on there. Let's see. So I could have had Okta MFA, but I have so many Okta MFAs set up. It's a madhouse, so I chose SMS just to give me some MFA, but now make it super difficult since this is just a dev site. 573.
Come on, this is reality. We like it.
So this is a home. If you haven't seen Okta before, this is the home page for users to log in. I only have 2 apps because this is dev. I have my AWS front end with SAML and SSO, and then I actually have my ASA. Another thing I didn't mention that I probably should is Okta is a platform. They bought ScaleFT, but they still left it its own platform. So even though when I connect this SAML, I'm connecting to a different tenant, it's totally separate from Okta. But they are still a parent or connected company, if you will. Just real quick, let's go through and I'm just going to check everything. How are we looking on time, CO?
You just started.
You're good.
Right on. Cool. So I have SSO set up for AWS. Not necessary, but just going to go through real quick, just make sure that everything's good. Let's see.
I feel like I'm at work.
This is probably much more streamlined. So this is very basic. I deployed a Windows host and a Linux host. Very simple. It's executable you install to control Windows, and about 3 commands you have to run on Linux hosts.
Yep.
I can see that my IP addresses are 13 and 3. Let's see if I can get to them now.
You're on a great T2 micro.
Oh yeah, we're all about the free stuff, right? These servers aren't really doing anything. So this is the blanking out, the ASA admin console. I can see that this user, Riley, mine user, has access to 2 servers. I can see that they are both Windows and Linux. This is the event logging I mentioned with all the where to and from. While I'm doing this, let's try something real quick. So what did I do before? So applications. So I have 2 applications running right now. So what I mentioned earlier is what happens is you control the users and the groups inside of Okta, and then Okta pushes them to your ASA environment. So there's 2 things that we look for when we're configuring ASA and Okta. You want to assign users access, which I have 2 users that have access, and then you want to push a group to ASA to manage everything, right? So I have one ASA admins group, and if I look inside of here and go to groups, this group was pushed to ASA. I did not actually do that. And then we have projects. Projects is where you assign users and groups to, meaning if I cluster my servers, whether I have 1 or 1,000 servers, I put them in this project, and then I assign groups to the project. In this case, my ASA admin is a group that is controlling that. And if I look, what are you doing? There it is. I guess I had to send and get a new certificate real quick. This is the properties of that group. I can see that the ASA admins are admin level users. I could just click that toggle box and they would become users. And I also see that I'm syncing to the server. So once I fix the login, we'll be able to see that pushed all the way from end to end. So let me try something real quick. What did I change before I got on the phone? Why does Riley not have access? Oh.
Seen them as active.
Yeah, I didn't do anything other than I added a test user to the group. And what else did I do? I created a use group.
Is there a key pair that you have to put in?
Nope. It's all done behind the scenes. Killing me. Okay, so now it let me in. You got to love it. So it tells me my session expires in 7 hours and 16 seconds. I don't know why, but when I added that user in, it did not like it. So let's see. First, you want to see what servers you have available to you. I know I have 2, but let's see them before we connect to them. Let me make this a little more readable. So there you go. You have 2 servers, Windows and Linux, 13 and 3 other octets. This list could be thousands of servers long. And I will say that we, as a company that is a managed service provider, we told Okta that we have 2,000 servers already across all of our customers. and we expect to have 10,000 servers within the next 3 years. And there's no way we can do this in a command line once we get to that level. So I can tell you that they're working on a fat client right now, either a fat client or a web-based access, so they can limit this. So let's see how this goes. We're going to try to connect to the Linux server first. SSH. So I type SFT, SSH, grab the name, hit enter. And if my live demo works and doesn't make me look like an idiot, it's going to let me go through. Booyah. So I'm in. So there you go. And you'll notice now that I'm logged into my EC2 instance, I'm still Riley. So now I can tell from login that I'm RWeb all the way from end to end.
Wow.
Doesn't matter where I am. It doesn't show it here. Yeah, it does, RWeb. So everywhere I'm logged in as one user. So that makes attestation, I don't want to say a breeze, but it definitely puts you in the right direction. All right, so let's see if I have access. So we're going to sudo yum update, because only admins can update, just to see if it works. Okay, no packages, but I can tell Riley is an admin just by the nature of that system working. Okay, so we're going to exit out of here. We're going to do SFT list servers again. This time we're going to grab the Windows server. So SFT, I want to do RDP, and I want to grab that name, paste it, and God willing, it's going to open up RDP, authenticate me, and drop it in.
There you go.
Boom, let me in. Cool. So I guess the key things to note here are our web right there was added to the system and to the administrators, and I did none of that. It was all ASA. And if we go back here and back SFT, SSH, CD Etsy, Ella about more past WD.
There you go.
And there it is. It created Riley. The system created it all end to end. I had no interaction of that. So that's the cool part of ASA. And what you can do, like I said, if you didn't want them to have admin, is you just change it to user. So they don't have any access to any root level commands. Choose update. And then you go to entitlements. And then entitlements, if you go in here, this is just a basic one I set up just to show you the proof. You just give it a name, give it a description. And here I said, you can run anything in user bin, which is like touch and some other commands. If I want, you can make just keep on stacking them, right? You can do an executable, you can do directory, you can do raw, and you just keep on stacking. You can have 20, 30, 100 commands in here if you want to get fancy. And just to update, I would go in here, click on this guy, the group details, and I would just add the sudoer. I would attach those commands to this group, and those would be the only commands that they could run on any of these servers. One thing that I may not have mentioned that I probably should is the entitlements currently only work on Linux. Right now on Windows, you can only do user and administrator. There is no in between. They're working on it, but that is the use case right now. So I think that's pretty much it. I mean, I can show you demoting somebody down to user and then do the commands, but it's like 7 minutes. So I tell you what, are there any questions?
Yeah, this is Curtis. We are working towards a least privilege type of
Absolutely.
And a question has come up a couple of different times with regard to some of the agents that are running on the system. So I'm curious as to what is the Okta agent required to have in terms of privilege?
So you either install the agent inline during the deployment of the machine, either make it part of user data if you're in AWS or one of the cloud vendors, or you run a script after the system comes online. or you can push it using some CI/CD pipeline. But you need a root or admin to install the application, the agent, the client, and then it has a small footprint. I think it has in here. Yeah. So it creates this user, an STFD that it runs everything under as that system account, and that is the account that it uses to communicate with Okta and do everything. So a couple of things about that. A lot of people ask me, what happens if the server loses connection to Okta, right? Because it's always getting those certificates. What happens to that environment? And the answer to that is, you can still log in. If you had access to the server before the server lost access to Okta, then you can still run commands in that context. If you were an admin, then you were an admin when it loses connection. If you're a user, you're still a user. You won't be able to change that user or disable that user if it cannot talk to Okta. So you got to get it to connect. It always has to have an active connection to Okta to make this work. That was kind of a challenge for some of our clients that wanted the servers to be totally isolated and run in private VPCs. But we have worked out a bastion reverse proxy that can go back out, that can talk, the servers can all talk to one bastion and talk to Okta through the bastion, and Okta can return back data through the bastion. So that kind of minimizes the servers chattering on the internet, if that is a concern for your team.
So what is the SFTD daemon operating? Is that required to execute as root as well?
So you install it as root, and then once it takes over, it has the permissions to create the users and modify. Let's see. So yeah, it doesn't own any files or anything. Everything works as the same. It just, it will write to the files as necessary. It writes to the NSConf, I believe, and to the passwd, and also the group file. But there are no more passwords anymore. So it only is managing the users going in and out, and it's also managing your certificate store. It's taking in new certs, it's putting it in the store, local trust store, and then it's also getting rid of them and putting in the new ones. But it does not need to be root level access. I don't have the exact permissions or what it actually can do, but I can tell you that ASA is very limited in what it does. The client is very small, and it does not interact with other parts of the system, right? If you already had users on the system, it would ignore them. It doesn't change their password. It doesn't lock them out. So a lot of people will use service accounts on the system without a password, and you log in as Riley, you sudo to the service account, you do your work, and then you log out.
Thank you.
Sure. I tell you what, if you ping me offline, I can get you that information. I just don't know it off the top of my head, as far as what all it can touch and what the total level of permissions are. It's a great question. I probably knew that in the summer when we were deploying it, but I've probably shoved that out for new information at this point. So please ping me after this and I will get that for you, or get you in touch with somebody at Okta that can get it for you if I'm unable to find it. It'd be my pleasure. Okay, I guess one last thing. CL, I'll send you this deck and you can send out these links. If anybody's interested in learning more about ASA, I recommend you go review these videos. This one's only 2 minutes long, super short, a lot of animation, keep you really engaged. I think this one is about 45 minutes. It's a little more in depth about the product. Oh no, excuse me, this is the product itself. This is the product information. And then this one is about 47 minutes and it is a webinar on ASA. Some of the features have changed since then. I think it was done at the beginning of this year. They're constantly updating this product. This is going to be their flagship moving forward. Of course, they'll always, the Okta and the SAML and the SSO will always be its bread and butter, but they are trying like gangbusters to take over the zero trust market and the kind of make a play for the PAM space. And with that, I will hand it back to CL. Thank you.
Thank you, Riley. Is there any more questions from anyone out there?
Great presentation.
Thank you. Thank you. I feel like I kind of blew through it, but I want to make sure that I didn't just waste all your time going slow. So I hope it wasn't too much for you.
I thought it was really impressive that you were troubleshooting the airplane while it was flying. That was incredible.
Yeah, I'm not usually able to talk and type, right? I used to be really good at that at 20s when I was on the help desk, right? Taking in information and typing it. But now I'm pretty single focused.
Well,
That's
I also
real
think,
life, though. You know, that's really.
I got to say, man, Okta as a platform is pretty awesome. It has saved our bacon more than once.